The mare had vanished again during the night, and Grant Zimmerman knew exactly where she had gone before he even finished his first cup of coffee that October morning in 1878. He set the tin cup down on the porch rail of his ranch house and squinted toward the eastern hills, where the sunrise painted the Colorado sky in shades of pink and gold. This was the third time in 2 weeks that Duchess had slipped through the fence and disappeared, and each time he had found her in the same place, standing among the charred remains of the old Patterson homestead, about 5 miles from his property line near Rico. The town itself sat nestled in the San Juan Mountains, a silver mining community that had sprung up just a few years prior, rough and ready like most mountain settlements. Grant grabbed his hat from the peg by the door and headed toward the barn. At 28, he had been running the Zimmerman Ranch for 6 years since his father passed, building it from a modest cattle operation into one of the more prosperous spreads in Dolores County. He took pride in his work, in the strong fences and well-kept buildings, which made Duchess's repeated escapes all the more frustrating. The mare was valuable, a gorgeous dapple gray with excellent bloodlines that he had purchased specifically for breeding purposes. He saddled his gelding, a sturdy bay named Marshall, and set out as the morning light strengthened across the rangeland. The October air carried a sharp bite that promised winter was not far off, and he pulled his jacket tighter as Marshall settled into an easy lope. The ride to the old Patterson place took about 40 minutes, following a trail that wound through stands of aspen and pine, their leaves and needles rustling in the cool breeze. The Patterson family had abandoned the homestead 3 years ago after a fire destroyed most of the main house and barn. Grant had heard the story from various sources in town, how William Patterson had moved his family to Denver after losing nearly everything. The property had sat empty ever since, slowly succumbing to the elements and the encroaching wilderness. Grant had ridden past it occasionally, but had never paid it much attention until Duchess started her mysterious pilgrimages. As he crested the final rise, he spotted Duchess immediately. The mare stood in what had once been the front yard, her head lowered as if grazing, though precious little grass grew among the weeds and debris. Grant urged Marshall forward, already forming the stern words he would direct at his wayward horse, when movement near the ruins caught his eye. A woman emerged from behind a partially standing wall, a bucket in her hands. She froze when she saw him, her body tensing like a deer preparing to bolt. Even from a distance, Grant could see she was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with long dark hair that hung past her shoulders. She wore a faded blue dress that had seen better days, and her feet were covered in worn boots that looked too large for her frame. Grant raised his hand in a peaceful gesture. "Morning," he called out, keeping his voice calm and unthreatening. "I am looking for my horse." The woman did not respond immediately. She set the bucket down slowly, her eyes never leaving him. Duchess, seemingly oblivious to the tension, wandered closer to the woman and nuzzled her shoulder with obvious familiarity. The gesture told Grant everything he needed to know about why his mare kept returning. "She has been coming here," the woman finally said. Her voice was soft but clear, with an educated quality that surprised him. "I have been feeding her." Grant dismounted, moving slowly and deliberately. "I appreciate that, but she is valuable stock. I need her back at my ranch." "I understand." The woman wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive posture that made her seem smaller and more vulnerable. "I did not mean to cause trouble. She just kept appearing and she seemed hungry." Grant took a few steps closer, leading Marshall by the reins. Now he could see the woman more clearly. She had striking features, high cheekbones and large brown eyes that watched him with a mixture of wariness and something else, perhaps loneliness. Her skin had the golden undertone of someone who spent time in the sun, and despite the shabby dress, she held herself with a certain dignity. "You have been living here?" Grant asked, glancing at the ruins. The main house was mostly destroyed, but he could see now that someone had made efforts to create shelter within the remaining structure. A piece of canvas had been stretched across one corner, forming a crude roof, and he could see blankets and a few supplies stacked near a makeshift fire pit. The woman's jaw tightened. "Is that against the law?" "No, I suppose not. The Pattersons abandoned this place fair and square." Grant studied her more carefully. "But winter is coming on fast in these mountains. This is no place to be when the snow starts falling." "I will manage." Her tone made it clear she considered the conversation over. Grant should have just collected Duchess and ridden away. He had plenty of work waiting back at the ranch, and this woman's circumstances were none of his business. But something about the situation bothered him, a nagging sense that leaving her here was wrong, even cruel. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then lifted her chin slightly. "Penelope Foster, Grant Zimmerman. I run the ranch about 5 miles west of here." He gestured in the direction he had come. "Miss Foster, I do not mean to pry, but are you out here alone?" "That is my business, Mr. Zimmerman." "It is, you are right." Grant ran his hand through his hair, a habit when he was thinking. "Look, I am not trying to cause you trouble. But Duchess here is going to keep coming back as long as you are feeding her, and I cannot have my breeding stock wandering all over creation. So we have got a problem." Penelope's expression softened slightly. "I could stop feeding her." "You could, but I suspect she has taken a liking to you beyond the food." Grant watched as Duchess moved even closer to Penelope, practically leaning against her. Horses are funny that way. They pick their people. For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched Penelope's lips as she stroked Duchess's neck. "She is a beautiful animal. That she is. Cost me a pretty penny, too." Grant made a decision that surprised him even as the words left his mouth. "Miss Foster, I have a proposition for you. I could use some help at the ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, has been talking about needing another set of hands with the cooking and cleaning, especially with winter coming. The job comes with room and board, fair wages, and you would not have to worry about freezing to death in these ruins." Penelope's eyes widened, suspicion flooding back into her features. "Why would you offer me work? You do not know anything about me. I know you have been surviving out here on your own, which tells me you are resourceful. I know you have a way with horses, which is useful on a ranch. And I know that no one should have to spend a Colorado winter in a burned-out homestead." Grant met her gaze steadily. "I am not offering charity, Miss Foster. I am offering honest work." She studied him for a long moment, and Grant found himself hoping she would say yes, though he could not quite explain why it mattered so much. There was something about Penelope Foster that intrigued him, a mystery in her eyes that suggested a story he wanted to understand. "I am not looking for a husband," Penelope said abruptly. "If you are thinking this is some kind of arrangement toward that end, you can forget it right now." Grant held up his hands. "That is not what I am offering. I need help running my ranch, nothing more. You would have your own room, your own space. Mrs. Chen is there as well, so you would not be alone with me if that is a concern." Penelope looked back at the ruins, at her meager shelter, and the few possessions she had managed to scrape together. Grant could almost see the internal debate playing out across her face. Pride versus practicality, independence versus survival. "1-month trial," she finally said. "If it does not work out, I leave, no questions asked." "Fair enough." Grant extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Penelope shook it. Her grip was firm despite her small hand being engulfed by his larger one. "I need to gather my things," Penelope said, pulling her hand back. "Take your time. I will wait." Grant watched as she disappeared into the ruins, then turned his attention to Duchess. "You have caused me a fair amount of trouble, girl," he murmured, running his hand down her neck. "But maybe it is trouble worth having." Penelope emerged a few minutes later carrying a worn carpet bag that looked like it held all her worldly possessions. Grant felt a pang of sympathy for what circumstances must have brought her to this point, but he kept the feeling from showing on his face. Something told him Penelope Foster would not appreciate his pity. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes." "Good, you can take Duchess. She seems to trust you already." Grant helped Penelope onto the mare, noting how naturally she settled into position despite the lack of a saddle. She really did have a way with horses. They set out toward the ranch, riding side by side as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky. For the first part of the journey, they rode in silence. Grant respected Penelope's apparent need for quiet, using the time to consider what he had just done. He had not been entirely truthful about Mrs. Chen needing help. His housekeeper managed the household just fine on her own. But something about leaving Penelope in those ruins had felt impossible, and now she was coming home with him, a stranger whose story he did not know and who clearly carried secrets. "How long have you been at the Patterson place?" Grant finally asked as they followed a creek through a grove of cottonwoods. 3 weeks. Penelope's answer was short, not encouraging further questions. Grant tried anyway. "Are you from around here?" "I am from back east originally, Pennsylvania." "That is a long way from Colorado." "Yes." Penelope's tone made it clear she would not be elaborating. Grant let it drop, but his curiosity only grew stronger. What had driven a clearly educated young woman from Pennsylvania to live alone in the ruins of an abandoned homestead in the Colorado mountains? She was running from something or someone, that much seemed obvious. But what or who remained a mystery. They rode on, and gradually Penelope seemed to relax slightly. She asked him about the ranch, about the town of Rico, careful questions that told him she was trying to understand the world she was entering. Grant answered honestly, describing the cattle operation, the handful of men he employed, the rhythms of ranch life. "Rico is rough," he said as they climbed a ridge that overlooked a valley. "Silver brings all kinds, some good, some less so, but the community is decent enough. We look after our own." "And you have lived here all your life?" Penelope asked. "Born and raised." "My parents came out here in '62, before Rico was much more than a prospector's camp. My father built the ranch from nothing, and when he passed, I took over." Grant pointed to a cluster of buildings visible in the distance. "That is home." The Zimmerman Ranch spread across a picturesque valley, with the main house positioned to take advantage of views in all directions. The house itself was a solid 2-story structure built from local timber, with a wide porch and stone chimney. Nearby stood a large barn, several outbuildings, corrals, and bunkhouses for the ranch hands. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and Grant felt the familiar surge of pride he always experienced when viewing his property. Penelope said nothing, but he saw her eyes widen slightly as she took in the scope of the operation. "It is a good spread," Grant said simply. "We work hard to keep it that way." As they rode into the yard, a small Chinese woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Chen had worked for the Zimmerman family for 15 years, arriving in Colorado with her late husband who had sought fortune in the silver mines. When he died in a cave-in, Grant's father had offered her a position as housekeeper, and she had been with them ever since. She was somewhere in her 50s, Grant guessed, though she never spoke of her age, and she ran the household with quiet efficiency. "Mr. Grant," Mrs. Chen called out in her accented English. "You found the horse." "I did, and I brought back some help." Grant dismounted and moved to assist Penelope, but she had already slid down from Duchess with practiced ease. "Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Penelope Foster. She's going to be staying with us, helping out around the ranch. Miss Foster, this is Mrs. Chen, who keeps this place running better than I ever could." Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes assessed Penelope in a single glance, and Grant saw understanding flash across her face. She knew he was bringing home a stray, but she also knew him well enough not to question it. "Welcome, Miss Foster, Mrs. Chen said, her tone warm. "You are hungry, yes, I make breakfast." "That is very kind, thank you," Penelope said quietly. "Come, come." Mrs. Chen gestured toward the house. "You put your things in room upstairs, I show you." Grant watched as Mrs. Chen ushered Penelope into the house, already chattering about the layout and the daily routines. He led both horses to the barn, his mind still turning over the morning's events. He had made an impulsive decision bringing Penelope here, but he did not regret it. Something about her called to him, sparked his protective instincts in a way he had not felt in years. After settling the horses and checking on the rest of his stock, Grant returned to the house. The smell of bacon and coffee greeted him as he entered the kitchen, and he found Penelope sitting at the large wooden table, a plate of food in front of her. She ate with controlled deliberation, as if trying not to appear too hungry, but Grant noticed how quickly the food disappeared. Mrs. Chen caught his eye and gave him a subtle nod toward the back porch. Grant excused himself and followed her outside. "That girl is starving," Mrs. Chen said in a low voice, "and scared. What you get yourself into, Mr. Grant?" "I do not rightly know," Grant admitted. "But I could not leave her out there. You have good heart, just like your father." Mrs. Chen patted his arm. "She can stay in the blue room upstairs. I make sure she has what she needs." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You be careful, though. That girl running from something, I see it in her eyes." Grant nodded. He had seen it too. "I will keep watch." Over the next few days, Penelope settled into life at the ranch with a determination that impressed Grant. Mrs. Chen set her to work helping with the cooking and cleaning, and Penelope attacked each task with focused intensity, as if proving her worth. She was up before dawn, working until well past sunset, and she spoke little beyond what was necessary. Grant found himself looking for excuses to be near the house, to catch glimpses of her as she went about her tasks. He watched her hanging laundry on the line, her dark hair catching the afternoon light. He observed her in the kitchen, learning Mrs. Chen's recipes with quick understanding. And he noticed how she would slip away whenever possible to visit the horses, spending long minutes with Duchess, whispering to the mare in tones too low for him to hear. On the fourth day, Grant found Penelope in the barn as evening fell. She was brushing down Duchess with long, practiced strokes, and she did not notice him at first. He leaned against a post, content to watch her work. There was something almost meditative about the way she moved, a peace in her face that he had not seen before. "You have done this before," Grant said finally, announcing his presence. Penelope startled but recovered quickly. "My father kept horses. I grew up around them." It was the first personal detail she had volunteered, and Grant seized on it carefully. "In Pennsylvania." "Yes. We had a small farm outside Philadelphia." Penelope's hand stilled on Duchess's flank. "That was a long time ago. What brought you out west?" The peace drained from Penelope's face, replaced by the guarded expression Grant was coming to know well. "The usual reasons. Looking for a fresh start." Grant knew he was being shut out again, but he tried once more. "Penelope, if you are in some kind of trouble, I might be able to help. I know people in Rico, contacts in Denver. Whatever it is, you do not have to face it alone." Penelope turned to face him fully, her eyes flashing with sudden emotion. "Why do you care? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Maybe not, but that does not mean I cannot want to help. She studied him for a long moment, and Grant held her gaze, letting her see his sincerity. Finally, Penelope sighed, the tension draining from her shoulders. I ran away from a bad situation, she said quietly. A man I was supposed to marry. My father arranged it before he died, and my uncle enforced it after, but I could not go through with it, so I left. Grant felt anger kindle in his chest. Did he hurt you? Not in the way you mean, but he would have. I saw it in him, the way he looked at me, the way he spoke about what our marriage would be like. Penelope's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I knew if I married him, I would lose myself completely, so I ran. How long have you been running? 6 months. I worked my way west, taking whatever jobs I could find, staying just long enough to earn some money before moving on. I was trying to get to California, but my money ran out in Durango. I walked to Rico, hoping to find work, but the town was not welcoming to a woman alone with no references. She laughed bitterly. I was living in a boarding house until my last coins were gone. Then I found the old Patterson place and figured it was better than sleeping in the streets. Grant's heart ached for what she had endured. This man, is he still looking for you? I do not know. Probably. My uncle sent letters to every town I passed through, or at least he did at first. But I have been careful not to use my real name most places. She met Grant's eyes. I should not have told you this. Now you will want me to leave. Why would I want that? Because I am trouble. Because having me here could bring problems to your door. Grant moved closer, stopping just a few feet from her. Let me tell you something, Penelope Foster. I'm not afraid of trouble, and I do not run from problems. You want to stay here, you work hard, you are honest with me. Then you have a place for as long as you need it. And if this man or your uncle somehow shows up looking for you, well, they will have to go through me first. Tears welled in Penelope's eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. Why are you being so kind to me? Grant did not have a good answer, at least not one he was ready to speak aloud. The truth was that Penelope had gotten under his skin in the few short days she had been at the ranch. He found himself thinking about her constantly, wondering about her story, wanting to see her smile, to hear her laugh, to know everything about her. But saying any of that would likely send her running, so he kept it simple. Because it is the right thing to do, he said. Penelope nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you, Grant, for everything. It was the first time she had used his given name, and the sound of it on her lips sent warmth spreading through his chest. You are welcome. Now come on. Mrs. Chen will have supper ready, and she gets irritated when people are late to her table. They walked back to the house together, and Grant noticed that Penelope stayed a little closer to him than before, as if his presence brought her comfort. It was a small thing, but it meant the world to him. The days turned into weeks, and autumn deepened its hold on the mountains. The aspens blazed gold and orange before dropping their leaves, and frost began appearing on the grass each morning. Grant prepared the ranch for winter, moving cattle to lower pastures, stockpiling feed, and ensuring all the buildings were sound against the coming snow. Penelope proved invaluable during this busy time. She worked alongside Mrs. Chen in preserving vegetables from the garden, canning and pickling enough food to last through the winter months. She mended clothes and linens, her neat stitches showing training from a gentler life. And whenever possible, she helped in the barn and with the horses, revealing a knowledge and skill that impressed even Grant's most experienced ranch hands. The men had been wary of her at first, unused to having a young woman around who was not spoken for. But Penelope handled their awkwardness with grace, keeping her interactions professional and friendly without encouraging any romantic attention. Grant appreciated her diplomacy, even as he struggled with his own growing feelings. He was falling in love with her. The realization hit him one morning as he watched her laughing at something Mrs. Chen said, her face bright with genuine joy. It was not just her beauty, though she was lovely. It was her strength, her determination, the way she had rebuilt herself from nothing. It was the gentle way she spoke to the horses and the fierce independence she maintained even while accepting help. It was everything about her, and Grant wanted more than anything to tell her how he felt, but he held back. Penelope had been clear from the start that she was not looking for a husband, and Grant respected that. She had been running from one man's claim on her life. The last thing she needed was another man trying to stake his own claim. So Grant kept his feelings locked away, content to simply be near her, to know she was safe and cared for. One evening in late November, an early snowstorm rolled through, dropping 6 inches in a matter of hours. Grant came in from checking on the livestock to find Penelope standing at the parlor window, watching the snow fall with an expression of wonder on her face. "First snow of the season," Grant said, hanging his coat and hat by the door. "It is beautiful," Penelope breathed. "I have never seen so much at once. This is nothing. Wait until January. We will get storms that dump 3 feet. Penelope turned from the window, her eyes bright. "I should be terrified by that, but I am just excited. Is that strange?" "Not strange at all. There is something magical about a Colorado winter, assuming you are warm and have plenty to eat." Grant moved to stand beside her at the window. "Of course, it also means we will all be cooped up together more. Cabin fever can set in pretty quick. I think I will manage." Penelope glanced at him, and Grant saw something new in her expression, a softness that had not been there before. "I have good company." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the snow transform the landscape into a pristine wonderland. Grant was acutely aware of how close Penelope stood, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her body. He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to pull her close and tell her everything he felt. But he stayed still, not wanting to break the moment. "Grant," Penelope said softly, "can I ask you something? Anything? Why have you never married? A man with a ranch like this, successful and kind, I would think women would be lining up." Grant chuckled. "I would not say lining up. But I have had opportunities, I suppose. It just never felt right. My father used to say that when you meet the right person, you will know because everything else fades away. The doubts, the questions, all of it just becomes clear." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I have been waiting for that clarity. And you think it exists, that kind of certainty?" "I do." Grant turned to look at her directly. "I have to believe it does." Penelope held his gaze for a long moment, and Grant saw something shift in her eyes, a recognition or maybe a fear. She broke away first, stepping back from the window. "I should help Mrs. Chen with supper," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Grant watched her go, his heart pounding. Had she understood what he was really saying? Did she feel it too, this pull between them that seemed to grow stronger every day? Mrs. Chen noticed the change in the air that evening at supper. Grant caught her watching him and Penelope with knowing eyes, a small smile playing at her lips. She said nothing, but Grant knew she had figured out his feelings long before he had admitted them to himself. After supper, Grant retreated to his office to work on the ranch accounts, but his mind kept drifting to Penelope. He wondered what she was doing, if she was thinking about him the way he thought about her. The wondering was driving him mad. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called out. Penelope entered, carrying a cup of coffee. "Mrs. Chen thought you might want this. She said you always work late on the accounts." "She is right, as usual." Grant accepted the cup gratefully. "Thank you." Penelope did not leave immediately. Instead, she wandered around the office, looking at the few personal items Grant kept there. She paused at a photograph on the shelf, a formal portrait of his parents on their wedding day. "They look happy," she observed. "They were 30 years together, and my father still looked at my mother like she hung the moon." Grant set down his pen. "I want that someday, that kind of love." "It is rare," Penelope said quietly. "Most marriages I have seen were arrangements, contracts for property and social standing. Love rarely entered into it. Maybe back east. Things are different out here. We do not have the same rigid social structures. People marry for love more often than not." Penelope turned to face him, leaning against his desk. "Is that why you never married? Because you were holding out for love?" "Yes, that is exactly why." Grant stood, moving closer to her. "Penelope, I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not make you want to leave. But I cannot keep it to myself anymore." Her eyes widened, and he saw her tense, but she did not retreat. "What is it?" Grant took a deep breath. "I have feelings for you, real, deep feelings. I think I started falling for you that first morning when I saw you in those ruins, looking so fierce and fragile at the same time. And every day since, those feelings have grown stronger. I know you said you are not looking for a husband, and I respect that. But I need you to know that you are not just an employee here. You are not a stray I took in out of charity. You matter to me, Penelope. You matter more than I can properly express." Silence filled the office, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. Penelope stared at him, her face cycling through a dozen emotions: fear, hope, confusion, longing. Finally, she spoke. "I am terrified," she whispered. "I swore I would never let another man have power over me, that I would never put myself in a position where someone could control my life. I am not asking for power over you. I am not asking to control anything about you." Grant took another step closer. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with ownership or control. It is about partnership, about building something together. It is about choosing each other every day, not because we have to, but because we want to." "You do not know what you are asking," Penelope said, her voice breaking. "I am damaged, Grant. What I went through, running away, living rough, never knowing if I was safe, it changed me. I am not the girl I was before. I do not want the girl you were before. I want the woman you are now. Strong, brave, resilient. The woman who survived and kept going, who rebuilt herself from nothing." Grant reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "The woman I have been falling more in love with every single day." Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks, and she made no move to stop them. "I am scared," she admitted. "I know, I am scared too. This kind of thing, it is terrifying, but it is also wonderful." Grant squeezed her hand gently. "I am not asking for an answer right now. I am not asking you to marry me or even to court me officially. I just needed you to know the truth about how I feel. And I need you to know that whatever you decide, you still have a place here. That does not change." Penelope looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Grant's face. "What if I am not ready? What if I need time?" "Then you take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you. We have got nothing but time, Penelope." She nodded slowly, and Grant saw some of the fear ease from her expression. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for understanding. Always." Grant raised her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, a courtly gesture that made her smile despite her tears. "Now you should probably get some rest. Mrs. Chen will have us both up before dawn with chores." Penelope laughed, a shaky but genuine sound that warmed Grant's heart. "You are right. Good night, Grant." "Good night, Penelope." She left the office, and Grant sank back into his chair, his heart still racing. He had laid his cards on the table, exposed himself completely. Now all he could do was wait and hope that Penelope would find the courage to take a chance on them. The next few weeks passed in a strange limbo. Penelope did not avoid Grant, but she seemed more cautious around him, as if constantly aware of the feelings between them. Grant maintained his patient distance, letting her work through whatever internal battle she was fighting. He continued to run the ranch, to include her in daily life, to treat her with the same respect and kindness he always had. December arrived with heavy snows that transformed the ranch into a winter landscape of stunning beauty. The work became more focused on basic survival, ensuring the animals stayed fed and warm, keeping the paths clear, maintaining the equipment. Grant's ranch hands bunked in for the duration, knowing that travel back and forth to Rico would become impossible once the real winter storms hit. Penelope flourished in the close quarters. She had a gift for reading people and situations, for easing tensions before they could escalate. The men respected her, and Mrs. Chen had come to rely on her as a true partner in managing the household. Grant watched it all with pride and love, content to observe her finding her place in this world he had built. Christmas approached, and Mrs. Chen threw herself into preparations with enthusiastic determination. She baked for days, filling the house with the scents of ginger and cinnamon, and she directed Penelope and Grant in decorating the main rooms with pine boughs and ribbons. Grant cut down a small spruce from the property, and they spent an evening together, the three of them plus the ranch hands, decorating it with popcorn strings and paper ornaments. It was the best Christmas Grant could remember in years. His parents had loved the holiday, and after their deaths, he had let the traditions slide, seeing no point in celebrating alone. But now, with Penelope here, everything felt different. The house felt like a home again, full of laughter and warmth and life. On Christmas Eve, after supper and after the ranch hands had retired to the bunkhouse with full bellies and whiskey, Grant found Penelope in the parlor, staring at the decorated tree with a wistful expression. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "My parents," Penelope said softly. "We always had such lovely Christmases when they were alive. After my father died, everything changed. My uncle had no patience for sentiment or celebration. This is the first time in 3 years that Christmas has felt real again." "I am glad you are here to share it with us." Penelope looked at him, and Grant saw something new in her eyes, a decision made. "I am glad too. Grant, I need to tell you something." His heart started to race, but he kept his voice calm. "I am listening. I have been thinking about what you said. About your feelings for me." Penelope took a deep breath. "At first I was terrified. All I could think about was running, protecting myself, maintaining my independence. But then I started really thinking about what you offered. Partnership, not ownership. Choice, not obligation. And—" Grant hardly dared to breathe. "And I realized that I have been lying to myself. I have feelings for you too, Grant. I think I have since the beginning, but I was too scared to admit it. Every time you smile at me, every time you show me kindness without expecting anything in return, every time you treat me as an equal, I fall a little more." Penelope's voice grew stronger, more certain. "I do not want to be alone anymore. I do not want to keep running from the possibility of love just because I was running from one bad man. You are not him. You are nothing like him." Grant moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I want to try. I want to see where this could go between us." Penelope squeezed his hands. "I am still scared. I am probably going to have moments where I panic or pull back, but I want to try because you are worth it. This, whatever we could have together, it is worth the risk." Grant felt joy explode in his chest, bright and overwhelming. "Penelope, I promise you, I will spend every day proving that your trust is not misplaced. I will never control you or try to take away your choices. You are your own person, and that is one of the things I love most about you." "You love me?" Penelope asked, her eyes shining. "I do. I love you, Penelope Foster, with everything I am." "I love you too," she whispered, and then she was leaning forward, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Grant cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the softness of her skin, the way she sighed against his mouth. The kiss deepened, and Grant felt years of loneliness and longing melt away, replaced by hope and joy and a love so strong it made his chest ache. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Penelope laughed, a sound of pure happiness. That was worth waiting for. It was perfect. Grant pressed his forehead against hers. "You are perfect." They stayed there on the sofa, wrapped in each other's arms, talking late into the night. Penelope told him more about her life before, about her parents and their farm, about the man her uncle had chosen for her, and why he had frightened her so badly. Grant listened, holding her close, offering comfort and understanding. In turn, Grant told her about his own losses, about his parents and how much he missed them, about the burden of running the ranch alone, and the loneliness that had sometimes threatened to swallow him whole. Penelope listened with her whole heart, and Grant felt layers of guardedness he had not even known he carried begin to peel away. As the clock struck midnight, welcoming Christmas Day, Grant kissed her again, slower and sweeter this time. "Merry Christmas, Penelope." "Merry Christmas, Grant." The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Grant and Penelope spent every possible moment together, learning each other's rhythms and preferences, building a foundation of trust and intimacy. They went on long walks through the snow when the weather permitted, bundled in heavy coats and holding mittened hands. They sat together in the evenings, reading aloud to each other or simply talking about their dreams for the future. Grant courted Penelope properly, despite the unusual circumstances of them living under the same roof. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers he found on his rides, a book of poetry he ordered from Denver, a pair of soft leather gloves that fit her perfectly. Penelope reciprocated with her own gestures, mending his clothes with care, making his favorite meals, leaving notes in his office that made him smile. Mrs. Chen watched it all with approval, muttering pleased observations in Cantonese as she went about her work. She had known from the start that Grant and Penelope belonged together, and she took pride in having been right. In February, during a brief thaw, Grant took Penelope into Rico for the first time. She had been nervous about going to town, worried that somehow her past would catch up with her, but Grant stayed close by her side, a steady, protective presence. They visited the general store, where Grant introduced her to the proprietor, John Kelly, and his wife, Sarah. They stopped by the doctor's office to say hello to Doc Mitchell, an old friend of Grant's father, and they had lunch at the hotel restaurant, a simple but pleasant meal that felt momentous to them both. As they rode back to the ranch that afternoon, Penelope was quiet, pensive. Grant gave her space, waiting for her to work through whatever she was thinking. "Everyone treated me with respect," she finally said as they approached the ranch gates. "No one looked at me like I was an outsider or questioned why I was with you. They just accepted me." "Why would they not?" Grant asked. "You belong here, Penelope. You belong with me." She turned to him with a radiant smile. "I am starting to believe that." Spring came slowly to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted, revealing new grass beneath. Wildflowers bloomed across the meadows in riots of color. The cattle, which had spent the winter in the lower pastures, were driven back up to the high country to graze. Life returned to the ranch in full force, and with it came a sense of new beginnings. On a warm evening in late April, Grant took Penelope on a ride to his favorite spot on the ranch, a high overlook that provided breathtaking views of the valley below. They watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, and Grant knew the time had come to ask the question that had been burning in his heart for months. "Penelope," he said, dismounting and helping her down from Duchess, "there is something I want to ask you." She looked at him with those beautiful brown eyes, and Grant saw understanding dawn in her expression. "Grant, are you?" He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band set with a single diamond, elegant and classic. It had belonged to his mother, and he could think of no one more worthy to wear it than Penelope. "I love you more than I can express with words," Grant said, his voice thick with emotion. "You came into my life when I did not even know I was waiting for you, and you have changed everything. You have made this house a home. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. Penelope Foster, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for the rest of our lives?" Tears streamed down Penelope's face as she nodded emphatically. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Grant, I will marry you. I love you so much." Grant slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and passion he felt. She clung to him, laughing and crying at the same time, and Grant knew he was the luckiest man alive. They planned the wedding for June, wanting to give enough time for proper preparations, but not wanting to wait too long. Mrs. Chen threw herself into the arrangements with joyful fervor, enlisting Penelope's help in every detail. They decided on a simple ceremony at the ranch, with the local minister officiating and the whole community invited to celebrate. Penelope wrote a letter to her aunt in Philadelphia, her mother's sister who had been kind to her before her father's death. She explained everything that had happened, her escape, her time on the run, and her new life with Grant. She invited her aunt to the wedding, but said she understood if the journey was too difficult. She also made it clear that if her uncle tried to interfere, he would find no welcome in Colorado. The letter she received back a few weeks later brought tears of joy. Her aunt was thrilled for her happiness and promised to make the journey west for the wedding. She also assured Penelope that her uncle had given up his search months ago, focusing instead on marrying off one of his own daughters. Penelope was free, truly free, to live her life without fear. The wedding day arrived sunny and perfect, one of those rare mountain days where everything seems to shine with extra brightness. Penelope wore a simple but lovely dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Grant had picked that morning. Grant wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed to perfection, and he could not stop smiling as he waited at the makeshift altar they had set up in front of the house. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Penelope's aunt cried happy tears throughout, and Mrs. Chen beamed with pride. The ranch hands cleaned up surprisingly well and served as witnesses, grinning at their boss's obvious joy. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Grant kissed Penelope with such tenderness that several of the ladies present had to dab at their eyes. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Tables laden with food stretched across the lawn. Music played, and people danced under the stars. Grant and Penelope moved through it all in a happy daze, accepting congratulations and good wishes from everyone present. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Grant pulled Penelope aside, leading her away from the crowd to the quiet of the barn. Duchess nickered softly from her stall, and Grant smiled. "I wanted to thank her," he said, stroking the mare's neck. If she had not kept running away to find you, we might never have met, Penelope laughed, joining him in petting the horse. I suppose I owe her everything then. We both do. Grant wrapped his arms around his wife, still marveling at being able to call her that. I love you, Mrs. Zimmerman. I love you too, Penelope said, turning in his embrace to kiss him. Thank you for saving me. You saved yourself, Grant corrected gently. You were the one who was strong enough to run, brave enough to keep going. I just provided a safe place to land. You provided so much more than that, Penelope insisted. You gave me hope again. You gave me a future I never thought I could have. They stood together in the quiet barn, holding each other as the sounds of the celebration faded in the distance. Grant thought back to that morning when he had found Duchess at the old Patterson homestead and discovered Penelope in the ruins. It had seemed like such a simple problem then, just his horse running off. He never could have imagined that it would lead to this, to the greatest joy of his life. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by hard work and deep love. Penelope became an integral part of running the ranch, her skills and instincts complementing Grant's perfectly. She had a particular gift for working with the horses, and under her care, the Zimmerman Ranch became known for breeding some of the finest stock in the region. Their first child, a boy they named Peter, arrived 2 years after their marriage. Grant was terrified through the entire pregnancy and birth, but when he held his son for the first time, he wept with joy. Penelope proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, while also maintaining the strength and independence that had drawn Grant to her in the first place. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Rose after Grant's mother. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes, and from the moment she could walk, she followed Grant everywhere, determined to be a rancher just like her daddy. As their children grew, Grant and Penelope made sure to tell them the story of how they met, how Duchess had kept running away and leading Grant to the old homestead where Penelope waited. The children loved the story, especially the romantic parts, though Grant and Penelope toned those down for young ears. Penelope's aunt became a regular visitor, making the journey from Philadelphia every few years to spend time with her niece and great-nieces and nephews. She always marveled at how Penelope had flourished in the West, how she had built a life of such substance and meaning. Mrs. Chen remained with them for many years, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to the children. She taught them Cantonese songs and how to make her special dumplings, and she never tired of reminding them how she had known from the start that their parents belonged together. The ranch continued to prosper under Grant and Penelope's joint management. They expanded operations carefully and sustainably, always mindful of the land and the animals in their care. They became pillars of the Rico community, known for their generosity and their willingness to help neighbors in need. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Grant took Penelope back to the old Patterson homestead. It had fallen further into ruin over the years, nature slowly reclaiming what humans had abandoned. They walked through the remains hand in hand, remembering that first meeting. I was so scared that day, Penelope said, looking at the spot where her makeshift shelter had been. I thought you were going to send me away or worse. I could never have sent you away, Grant said, pulling her close. Even then, I think some part of me knew you were important, that finding you meant something. Duchess knew, Penelope said with a smile. Smart horse. They stood together in the ruins, the place where their story had begun, and Grant felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the path his life had taken. One runaway horse had led him to the love of his life, to a partnership that had enriched every aspect of his existence, to a family that filled his days with purpose and joy. As they rode back to the ranch that afternoon, Grant reflected on everything they had built together. The thriving operation, the beautiful children, the deep and abiding love that continued to grow stronger with each passing year. He thought about all the small moments and large triumphs they had shared, all the challenges they had faced together and overcome. Their children grew into fine young adults. Peter proved to have his mother's way with horses and his father's head for business, and he eventually took over more and more of the ranch operations. Rose married a young lawyer from Denver, a kind man who treated her with the respect and partnership she had learned to expect from watching her parents. They settled in Rico, where her husband opened a practice, and they gave Grant and Penelope their first grandchildren. As Grant and Penelope entered their later years, they took on advisory roles at the ranch, offering guidance to Peter while enjoying more leisure time together. They took long rides through the mountains, revisiting their favorite spots and making new memories. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching sunsets and holding hands, their love as strong as ever. One summer evening, when they were both in their 60s, Grant and Penelope sat on that familiar porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch was alive with the sounds of family and laughter, exactly as Grant had always dreamed it would be. "You ever regret it?" Grant asked, taking Penelope's hand. "Running away, ending up here instead of the life you might have had back east?" Penelope looked at him with eyes still bright with love after all these years. "Not for a single moment. This life, our life together, it is everything I never knew I wanted. You gave me freedom, Grant. Real freedom, the kind that comes from choosing your own path and building something meaningful." "You gave me purpose," Grant replied. "I had the ranch, I had success, but I was lonely. You made everything matter, you made it all come alive." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the sun paint the Colorado sky in brilliant colors. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, the legacy they had built together from that chance meeting in the ruins so many years ago. Duchess had long since passed, dying peacefully in her sleep at the impressive age of 28. They had buried her in a place of honor on the ranch, and they sometimes visited her grave to leave wildflowers and thank her for bringing them together. As the years continued to pass, Grant and Penelope remained devoted to each other and to the life they had created. They watched Peter take the ranch to new heights, incorporating modern techniques while maintaining the values his parents had instilled. They delighted in their growing collection of grandchildren, each one a unique blend of the Zimmerman and Foster bloodlines. They traveled occasionally, visiting Penelope's aunt in Philadelphia one memorable trip, and even making it to San Francisco to see the ocean. But they always returned to the ranch with relief and joy, knowing that home was where they belonged. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their family threw them a grand celebration. Children, grandchildren, old friends, and neighbors gathered to honor the couple who had become legends in their own time, not for wealth or fame, but for the depth of their love and the quality of their character. As Grant looked around at the celebration, at all the faces of people they had touched and lives they had influenced, he felt a profound sense of peace and completion. The scared, lonely rancher he had once been seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a man rich beyond measure in the things that truly mattered. Penelope caught him looking emotional and squeezed his hand. "What are you thinking about?" "About how one runaway horse changed my entire life," Grant said with a smile. "About how the best things often come when we least expect them." "I was thinking the same thing," Penelope admitted. "I was so lost that day, living in those ruins, barely surviving. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." They danced together that night, moving slowly to music played by local musicians, surrounded by the family and community they had built. Grant held Penelope close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "I would do it all again," he whispered in her ear. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you every single time." "And I would choose you," Penelope whispered back, "always and forever." The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually, Grant and Penelope slipped away to their bedroom, a sanctuary that had witnessed decades of love and intimacy. They prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage, each knowing exactly how the other liked things. As they settled into bed, Grant pulled Penelope close, and she rested her head on his chest, her hand over his heart. It was the way they had slept for 40 years, a position that felt as natural as breathing. "You remember that first night after you told me how you felt?" Penelope asked sleepily. "I was so terrified and so hopeful at the same time." "I remember everything," Grant said, stroking her hair. "Every moment with you is precious to me. We have had a good life, Haven, not we." There was a note of wonder in her voice, as if she still could not quite believe the happiness they had found. "The best life," Grant confirmed. "And it is not over yet. We still have plenty of time to make more memories." Penelope tilted her head up to kiss him gently. "I love you, Grant Zimmerman. Thank you for being patient with me, for giving me time to find my courage." "I love you, Penelope Zimmerman. Thank you for taking a chance on a simple rancher who did not even know what he was missing until you appeared in his life." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found their perfect match against all odds. Outside, the Colorado night settled over the ranch, peaceful and serene, the stars shining bright overhead. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and Grant and Penelope moved through them together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced the challenges of aging with grace and humor, supporting each other through health scares and the inevitable losses that came with growing older. When Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully at the age of 83, they mourned her deeply, remembering all she had meant to their family. She was buried in the Rico Cemetery with full honors, and Penelope placed a bouquet of wildflowers on her grave every week for the rest of her life. Grant and Penelope eventually became great-grandparents, marveling at the continuation of the family line they had started. They took joy in watching the young ones explore the ranch, seeing in their eyes the same wonder and excitement they had once felt about this beautiful land. As they entered their 70s, Grant and Penelope slowed down naturally, but they never lost their zest for life or their love for each other. They still took rides when weather permitted, though now they went more slowly and stopped more often to rest. They still sat on the porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset, grateful for another day together. One evening, as they sat in their customary spot, Penelope turned to Grant with tears in her eyes. "I want you to know something," she said softly. "If I had known that running away would lead me to you, I would have done it sooner. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Grant felt his own eyes mist over. "You saved me, Penelope. I did not even know how lonely I was until you filled that empty space. You made my life complete in ways I never imagined possible." They kissed, a sweet and tender gesture that still held all the love and passion of their younger years. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged through decades of shared experiences, mutual respect, and unwavering devotion. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Grant helped Penelope to her feet, and they walked inside together, ready to end another perfect day in the life they had built. The ranch would continue on through Peter and his children, but Grant and Penelope's legacy would live forever in the love they had shared and the example they had set. They prepared for bed with the same comfortable routine, helping each other with the small tasks that had become more difficult with age. Grant brushed out Penelope's hair, now silver instead of dark, and she helped him with the buttons on his nightshirt that his arthritic fingers struggled with. As they climbed into bed, Grant pulled Penelope close, marveling as he always did at how perfectly she fit against him. "Sweet dreams, my love," he whispered. "Sweet dreams," Penelope replied, her voice drowsy and content. "I will see you in the morning." And so they drifted off to sleep, two souls intertwined, living proof that love could conquer fear, that trust could overcome trauma, and that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. The runaway horse, the woman in the ruins, the rancher who could not walk away, they had all played their parts in a love story that would be told and retold through generations. The ranch continued to thrive under Peter's management, incorporating new generations while maintaining the core values his parents had established. The Zimmerman name became synonymous with quality and integrity throughout the region, a testament to the foundation Grant and Penelope had built together. As Grant and Penelope celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, they reflected on the incredible journey their life together had been. From that first uncertain meeting in the ruins of the Patterson homestead to this moment of celebration and joy, they had built something remarkable. 50 years, Penelope marveled, looking at the crowd of family gathered in their honor. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck, Grant said, taking her hand and kissing it. It was choice. Every day we chose each other. Every challenge, every triumph, we faced it together. That is not luck, my darling. That is love. The celebration was joyous, filled with stories and laughter and the warmth of family bonds. As the evening wore on and the younger children began to get sleepy, the family gradually dispersed, leaving Grant and Penelope alone on their porch once more. "This is my favorite place," Penelope said, leaning her head on Grant's shoulder. "Right here with you, watching the night settle over our land." "Our land," Grant repeated, loving the sound of it. "Everything we built together, equal partners from the start." "You kept your promise," Penelope said softly. "You never tried to control me or take away my choices. You treated me as your equal in every way that mattered." "It was easy," Grant said honestly. "You are my equal in every way. You always were." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who knew each other so well that words were often unnecessary. The ranch settled down for the night around them, animals bedding down, the last lights going out in the bunkhouses. Peace descended, deep and complete. "Grant," Penelope said eventually. "Do you think about dying?" "Sometimes," Grant admitted. "I am not afraid of it, not really. I have lived a full and happy life, but I worry about leaving you." "I worry about the same thing," Penelope confessed. "The thought of being without you, it terrifies me more than anything ever did. Even more than running away from my uncle all those years ago." Grant turned to look at her, cupping her face gently. "Then we will go together," he said firmly. "Not today, not tomorrow, but when our time comes. We have lived our lives together. It seems only right that we would leave together too." Penelope smiled through tears. "That sounds perfect." They sat together a while longer, then made their way to bed for another night wrapped in each other's arms. The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and celebrations, by the births of new family members and the inevitable losses that came with time. Grant and Penelope remained devoted to each other until their final days. They passed away within hours of each other in their sleep, both in their 80s, still holding hands in the bed they had shared for over 50 years. The family gathered to mourn them, but also to celebrate a love story that had touched everyone who witnessed it. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone marking their graves. The inscription reads simply, Grant and Penelope Zimmerman, together in life, together in death. Their love was their legacy. And in a small paddock near the house, descendants of Duchess grazed peacefully, carrying on the bloodline of the horse whose wandering had brought two lonely souls together and changed the course of so many lives. The ranch continued to prosper, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love, respect, and partnership that Grant and Penelope had established all those years ago. Their story became legend in Rico and the surrounding areas, a tale told to remind people that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that second chances were possible, and that true partnership meant choosing each other every single day. Children who grew up hearing about the rancher and the woman in the ruins carried those lessons into their own lives, building relationships based on the model Grant and Penelope had set. The old Patterson homestead, where it all began, eventually collapsed completely, reclaimed by nature. But a marker was placed there by the family, commemorating the spot where Grant Zimmerman found Penelope Foster and began the greatest love story the county had ever known. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light hit just right, locals swore they could see two figures on horseback riding through the hills together. A man and a woman, their love transcending even death itself, forever choosing each other as they rode through the beautiful Colorado landscape they had called home.